The clock struck midnight as Emma's phone lit up with a message that would change everything. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her heart raced, knowing exactly who it was from. David, 19 years her senior, her mentor, her forbidden desire. She stared at those 7 words, fingers hovering over the screen, knowing that her response would cross a line they had both been carefully avoiding for months. If you're enjoying this journey into a complicated love story that challenges societal expectations, please hit that like button and subscribe to follow more stories that explore the complex nature of human connection. Emma first met David at the university library where she worked part-time while pursuing her master's degree in literature. At 45, David was a respected professor of philosophy, known for his brilliant mind and quiet demeanor. Their conversations began innocently enough, discussions about books, theories, and life's big questions. But somewhere between Plato's Republic and Austen's Pride and Prejudice, something shifted. A lingering glance, a brush of hands while reaching for the same book, the electricity that filled the air when they found themselves alone in the stacks. "I shouldn't be feeling this way," Emma confessed to her roommate Zoe one evening after returning from another late-night discussion with David at the campus coffee shop. "He's my professor's colleague. He's older than my father. It's inappropriate." Zoe shrugged, flipping through a magazine. "Age is just a number, Em. You're 26, not 16. You're both adults." But it wasn't that simple. Emma had watched her mother struggle through a relationship with an older man after her parents' divorce, the power imbalance, the different life stages, the judgment from others. She had sworn she would never put herself in that position. David wrestled with his own demons. Divorced for 5 years after a marriage that had slowly withered into polite indifference, he had focused entirely on his academic career. His daughter, now in college herself, was only a few years younger than Emma. The thought made him wince with guilt whenever his mind wandered to Emma's smile, her passionate arguments about feminist literature, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams. Their professional relationship provided the perfect excuse for their growing friendship. They collaborated on a research project, which meant long hours in his office, surrounded by books and the scent of coffee. They maintained boundaries, always leaving the door open, keeping conversations scholarly, ignoring the tension that hummed between them like a live wire. Until the night of the faculty gala. Emma attended as part of the library staff. David gave a speech about the importance of questioning established norms. Their eyes met across the room as he spoke about courage and authenticity. Later, they found themselves on the balcony, the sounds of the party muffled behind closed doors. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said, his voice low. "I'd been trying not to notice." Emma's heart pounded. "We shouldn't be having this conversation." "I know." He stepped back, creating distance between them. "I respect you too much to complicate your life." That should have been the end of it. They should have returned to their professional relationship, pretended the moment never happened. But life rarely follows the path of should. A week later, Emma's grandmother passed away. The woman who had raised her after her mother's struggles with addiction, who had encouraged her love of literature, who had been her rock. Emma found herself sitting on a bench in the campus garden, tears streaming down her face, when David found her. He sat beside her, not touching, just present. He listened as she shared stories about her grandmother. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix her pain. He simply witnessed it. "Thank you," she said finally, wiping her eyes. "For seeing me." "I always see you, Emma," he replied, his voice gentle. "That's the problem." The weeks that followed were a dance of approach and retreat. Coffee meetings that lasted until the shop closed. Text messages about books that evolved into deeper conversations. Both of them aware of the line they were approaching but careful not to cross it. Until David received an offer from another university across the country. A prestigious position he couldn't refuse. He had 2 months before he needed to leave. "I should be happy for you," Emma said when he told her, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. "Come with me," he said suddenly, then immediately shook his head. "I'm sorry. That's unfair. You have your life here, your studies." "You would want that?" she asked, surprised. "What I want and what's right for you are different things," he answered carefully. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma sent a text, "Can we talk?" Not at the university. They met at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town. The conversation was stilted at first, both aware of what remained unspoken between them. "This age gap feels wrong," she whispered softly after their meals arrived, barely touched. "Everyone would judge us. My friends, your colleagues, your daughter." "I know," he said. "I've thought about all of that. I've thought about the power dynamics, about what people would say, about whether I'm being selfish even considering this." "And," she prompted. "And I still find myself thinking about you. About us. About possibilities." Emma looked down at her plate. "I've spent my whole life doing what's expected. Being the responsible one. Making safe choices. You don't have to make any decisions tonight," David said. "I just wanted you to know where I stand before I leave." But as they walked to their cars afterward, the rain beginning to fall around them, Emma stopped beneath the shelter of a storefront awning. "I'm tired of letting fear make my choices," she said. "I'm tired of worrying about what others think." That night, they embraced every spark of their connection. Not physically, they were both determined to move slowly, to be certain, but emotionally. They talked until sunrise about their fears, their hopes, the practical challenges they would face. They acknowledged the difficulties ahead but decided that what they had found in each other was worth fighting for. The following months weren't easy. David moved across the country, and they committed to a long-distance relationship while Emma finished her degree. They faced exactly the judgment they had expected: raised eyebrows from colleagues, concerned questions from friends, outright disapproval from some family members. Emma's mother was particularly vocal. "I've been where you are," she warned during a tense lunch. "The older man who seems so mature, so different from guys your age. It doesn't end well." "David isn't Dad's friend who took advantage of you after the divorce," Emma replied firmly. "Our situations are completely different." "The age gap is the same," her mother countered. "The people aren't." David's daughter Lily was initially cold when they finally met, 6 months into their relationship. "This is weird," she told her father bluntly. "She's closer to my age than yours." "I know this is difficult," David acknowledged. "I'm not asking for your approval, but I am asking for your respect, both for my choices and for Emma." Over time, some of the opposition softened. Those who truly cared about them saw the genuine connection they shared. Others never came around, and Emma and David learned to accept that not everyone would understand their relationship. The real challenges, however, weren't external but internal. They were at different life stages, with different references and experiences. David worried about holding Emma back from experiences someone her age should have. Emma sometimes felt intimidated by David's established career and life experience. "Do you ever think about having more children?" Emma asked one evening during a video call, the question that had been weighing on her mind for weeks. David was silent for a moment. "I hadn't planned to. But with you, I would consider it." "Is that something you want?" "I think so. Someday. Not now, but eventually." These conversations were difficult but necessary. They discovered that some of their fears about the age gap were founded, while others were not. They learned to communicate openly about their concerns rather than letting them fester. A year after David's move, Emma completed her master's degree. She had been accepted to doctoral programs at several universities, including one near David. The decision loomed before her: follow her heart or forge her own path. "I don't want you to choose me over your dreams," David told her as they discussed her options during her visit to his new home. "What if you're part of my dreams now?" she asked. "Not the whole dream, but part of it?" In the end, Emma chose a university 2 hours from David, close enough to build a life together, far enough to maintain her independence. She rented her own apartment, determined to establish herself professionally without relying on him. Their relationship deepened as they navigated these challenges together. They learned that the age gap brought not only difficulties but gifts. David's perspective helped Emma navigate professional situations she found challenging, while Emma's fresh outlook and questioning nature pushed David to reconsider long-held beliefs. 3 years into their relationship, on a beach at sunset, David proposed. Emma said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small, just those who had supported their relationship and come to understand the love they shared. Emma's mother attended, still not entirely convinced but willing to try. "He makes you happy," she acknowledged during the reception. "That's what matters in the end." Lily, now graduated and beginning her own career, had slowly warmed to Emma. "You're good for him," she said as they shared a dance. "He's different with you. More alive." Not everyone got their happy ending. Emma's friend Zoe had embarked on her own relationship with an older man, inspired by Emma and David's story. But her situation had been different, the man controlling, isolating her from friends. Emma had helped her leave the relationship, a painful reminder that age gaps could indeed mask unhealthy dynamics. "How did you know?" Zoe asked her once, after she had begun to heal. "How did you know David was different?" Emma considered the question carefully. "He always put my growth first. He never tried to make me smaller to fit into his life. And we really talk about the hard things." 5 years after that first midnight text message, Emma and David sat on their porch, watching the sunset. Emma's doctoral dissertation was nearly complete, and David had just been named department chair. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been theirs. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Taking a chance on us, despite everything?" David smiled, taking her hand. "Not for a second. Some of the best decisions in life are the ones that scare us the most." Inside, their 6-month-old daughter slept peacefully, a bridge between their worlds, a symbol of the future they had chosen to build together. Their story wasn't perfect. They still faced challenges related to their 19-year age difference. They still encountered judgment from strangers. They still had difficult conversations about aging, about the future, about the years David would likely miss that Emma would face alone. But they had learned that love isn't about finding someone who makes life easy, it's about finding someone who makes the difficult parts worthwhile. They had learned that courage isn't the absence of fear but the willingness to move forward despite it. They had learned that sometimes, the relationships that challenge social norms are the ones that help us grow the most. As the stars appeared above them, Emma thought about that night years ago when she had whispered her fears about their age gap. How far they had come since then. How much they had overcome. How right it had felt, despite everything, to embrace every spark of their connection. 10 years into their marriage, Emma and David faced one of their most challenging moments, a reunion at the university where they had first met. The philosophy department was celebrating its centennial, and as a former faculty member who had made significant contributions, David had been invited to speak. Emma, now Dr. Emma Winters Callahan with her own successful career as a literary scholar, would be attending as his wife. They hadn't returned to campus together since leaving years ago. The invitation brought a flood of memories, both sweet and uncomfortable. "Are you sure you want to go?" Emma asked, watching David's face as he read the formal invitation for the third time. Their daughter Lily, now 10 and named after her half-sister, was at school, and their 3-year-old son James was napping upstairs. David set the invitation down on their kitchen counter. "I think we should. It's been a decade, Em. We're not the same people who left whispering in the shadows." Emma nodded, but anxiety flickered across her face. "Some of your old colleagues will be there. Professor Harmon, who told you that you were having a predictable midlife crisis. Dean Wilson, who suggested I was using you for academic advancement." David reached across the counter and took her hand. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the years, silver now dominating his once dark hair. At 55, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had made peace with his choices. And they'll meet a respected professor and his equally accomplished wife, with 2 beautiful children and a relationship that has lasted longer than most of them gave us credit for. Emma smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. At 36, she had grown into herself in ways she couldn't have imagined when she first fell in love with David. The insecure graduate student was now a woman who had published 2 books and taught at a prestigious university. The age gap that had once seemed so defining had gradually become just one aspect of their relationship, not its defining feature. "You're right," she said. "Besides, I'm curious to see how the campus has changed." The evening of the reunion arrived with a crisp autumn chill. They had left the children with David's daughter Lily, now 29, and married herself, who had become a loving big sister to her younger siblings despite the unconventional family structure. Emma wore a deep blue dress that complemented her eyes, her hair swept up elegantly. David, handsome in his charcoal suit, watched her with the same admiration he had shown for a decade. "You still look at me that way," Emma said softly as they parked on campus. "What way?" David asked, turning off the engine. "Like you did in the library when you thought I wasn't noticing." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Some things never change." They walked across the campus hand in hand, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. The library where they had first met was illuminated against the night sky, its windows glowing warmly. "Should we stop in?" David suggested. "For old time's sake?" Emma nodded, and they diverted from their path to the philosophy building. The library was quiet, most students gone for the evening. They made their way to the literature section where Emma had been shelving books the day they first spoke. "You asked me if I could recommend something by Virginia Woolf," Emma recalled, running her fingers along the spines of books. "I was so nervous I nearly dropped the entire stack I was holding. And I was trying so hard to sound intelligent while being completely distracted by your smile," David admitted. They found themselves in the small reading alcove where they had spent countless hours discussing books and ideas before either of them had acknowledged their feelings. "I fell in love with your mind here," David said quietly. "Before I ever allowed myself to think about anything else." Emma leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I was terrified of what I was feeling. I kept telling myself it was just intellectual admiration." A voice interrupted their moment. "Professor Callahan? Is that you?" They turned to see an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, Professor Martha Jenkins, the former head of the philosophy department and one of the most vocal critics of their relationship when it began. "Professor Jenkins," David acknowledged with a polite nod. "Yes, it's me. You remember my wife, Dr. Emma Winters Callahan?" The older woman's eyes moved to Emma, assessing. "Of course. You've made quite a name for yourself in literary criticism. Your work on feminist perspectives in modernist literature was impressive." Emma blinked in surprise at the compliment. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say." An awkward silence fell between them. Professor Jenkins seemed to be struggling with something she wanted to say. "I owe you both an apology," she finally stated, her voice firm but quieter than her usual commanding tone. "I was judgmental about your relationship. I made assumptions that were unfair." David and Emma exchanged a glance of surprise. "My daughter recently married someone 15 years her senior," Professor Jenkins continued. "A wonderful man who treats her with tremendous respect. It's made me reconsider some of my previous positions." "Thank you for saying that," Emma said sincerely. "It means a lot." "Are you attending the centennial dinner?" David asked. Professor Jenkins nodded. "I am. Perhaps we could continue this conversation there? I'd be interested to hear about your current research, both of you." As they walked toward the philosophy building together, Emma felt a weight lifting that she hadn't realized she still carried. The campus that had once been filled with whispers and sidelong glances now felt like neutral ground, a place where they could simply be themselves. The centennial celebration was held in the Grand Hall, transformed with elegant decorations and filled with faculty past and present. As they entered, Emma squeezed David's hand. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ready," she replied with confidence. Throughout the evening, they moved through conversations with grace. Some colleagues were warm and welcoming, genuinely interested in their lives and careers. Others maintained a polite distance, their disapproval still evident but muted by time. When David was called to give his speech, Emma watched from their table with pride. He spoke eloquently about the evolution of philosophical thought, about questioning established norms, about the courage to follow truth wherever it led, personal or academic. The greatest lesson philosophy has taught me, he concluded, is that wisdom often comes from being willing to reconsider our most deeply held beliefs. To examine not just the world around us, but our own assumptions about how that world should function. His eyes found Emma's across the room, and the love between them was palpable. Later, as they danced slowly to the music of the small orchestra, Emma rested her head against David's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Do you remember when we danced at Lily's wedding?" she asked. "Your daughter, not ours," she clarified with a smile. "How could I forget? It was the first time you met my extended family. Your aunt cornered me by the cake table and asked if I was planning to trade you in for a newer model when you got too old," Emma recalled with a soft laugh. David winced. "I never knew she said that. It's funny now. It wasn't then." Emma looked up at him. "But here we are, a decade later, and I'm still madly in love with you. Gray hair, reading glasses, dad jokes and all." "The dad jokes are new," he protested with mock indignation. "They're terrible," she teased. "Our children are going to need therapy." As the evening drew to a close, they found themselves walking back across campus toward their car. The night was clear, stars visible above the university buildings where their unlikely love story had begun. "I was so afraid back then," Emma admitted. "Afraid of what people would think, afraid of the future, afraid of the pain we might cause each other." "And now?" David asked, his arm around her waist. Emma stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Now I know that some fears are worth facing. That sometimes the path that seems most difficult leads to the greatest joy." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that time had etched there. In his eyes, she still saw the man who had challenged her thinking in the library, who had respected her enough to almost walk away, who had built a life with her that defied expectations. "This age gap once felt wrong," she whispered, echoing words from long ago. "But loving you has always felt right." Under the same stars that had witnessed their beginning, they kissed, not as the professor and graduate student they had once been, but as partners who had weathered judgment, overcome obstacles, and built something beautiful together. As they drove away from campus, Emma looked back at the library glowing in the distance. The place where it all began now felt like just one chapter in a much longer story, one they were still writing together, one day at a time. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share stories that explore the complexities of human relationships, the courage it takes to follow your heart, and the beauty that can be found when we dare to look beyond societal expectations. Remember that the most meaningful journeys often begin with the most difficult first steps. Thank you for joining us on this one.